Milton asked for occupation and educational backgrounds of parents. Is that considered in the admissions process in terms of admitting a student?
Not at all. I think a lot of times what we're looking for is if the parents did go to a boarding school, if they went to Milton Academy, if they went to Andover, so the student is more likely to choose Andover because of that. And so I think that the occupation of the parents doesn't necessarily sway us one way or another. And to be honest, I think it's really cool when a parent has a cool occupation. I think that's really great.
Does having a family connection, like having a sibling or having a parent that went to the school, does that have any effect on admitting a student?
I think so, yeah. And I think we make sure that the student, of course, is the right fit. There are plenty of students here that have siblings that apply that just aren't the right fit. But I certainly think that that's a part of the application process, and that is part of the whole process. Is where we're looking across and making sure that students are going to be the right fit at the end of the day.
Right. Gotcha. I know when I applied, there was definitely Milton Academy was definitely one of the more selective schools. And looking at the trends right now, as of the past few years, what do you see in terms of the demographics and in terms of the future? How does Milton see its selectivity going?
Yeah, I think, since I've been here, our application pool has doubled. So obviously it's gotten a lot more selective. So when I first started here, I think that the acceptance rate was about 25 or 23%, somewhere in that range. And I think this year we're somewhere in the neighborhood of like 13%. So it's definitely gotten a lot harder for the applicants and also for the admission officers, right? I have to keep in mind when I'm reading all these applications that 1, maybe 2 out of 10 are going to be accepted. And that's why it's so, it's hard for the admission officer, because there are so many talented kids every year that we just aren't able to accept. And that's sort of the hard reality of working at a place like this, is that there are going to be 8 kids that might be very qualified, but we just don't have enough space for.
So I think that all comes down maybe to the deliberation aspect of selecting an applicant. So in terms of there are so many qualified applicants, I don't know if you can even articulate how hard it is to do it, but how does the admissions office grapple with selecting a very similar applicant? What does it come down to?
I think it comes down to a lot of the small things. Like we talked about the interview process, and I know definitely throughout the year, I have some of my favorite interviews that turn into applications, and so I'm really pulling for those kids that I had a really positive experience with, and so do the rest of my colleagues. We all have sort of our favorites, so that's why committee is such a valuable tool, is because everybody's got their favorites, everybody's fighting for their particular kids, and we're not accepting any kids that someone didn't love, right? And I think that's a really important part of the process, is sort of the interview, and making sure that someone sort of loves you.
So I guess when it comes to the end of the admission cycle, there comes to a point where there are only a couple applicants left or a couple spots left. Does it come to the numbers when it gets to that point?
Numbers in terms of quotas to fill and things like that, demographics, not too much. And again, it's never down to we're never really looking for the 152nd kid to fill this class, right? I think number 1 through hopefully around 155 of our freshman class is going to be really, really strong. And so as we're talking about these kids, during committee, we're not really ranking them 1 through 155. So we're trying to make it as well-rounded and as balanced as possible. And again, there are different things that we're looking for in every student. We can't accept, let's just say 50 boys and 49 of them play soccer, right? And so we are looking for kids that play football and kids that play soccer and kids that run cross country. And so we're trying to make it as well-rounded as we possibly can.
Sure. Now that you mentioned like sports and all that, can we go a little bit into athletic recruiting at Milton? Or I know a lot of schools, especially bigger boarding schools, they would recruit athletes into the school. Does Milton do that, or does the office look at it differently?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily recruit athletes. Coaches have a really good opportunity to connect with our prospective families and prospective students early in the process. For instance, if we know a student plays hockey, we're going to reach out to Paul Canada and make sure that he knows that, you know, Jimmy Smith plays hockey and he's going to be visiting campus on September 25th. And so throughout the whole process, you know, Coach Canada is going to have an opportunity to see Jimmy play hockey, hopefully. And then around the beginning of January, we ask coaches to submit lists, and they're just suggestions, right?
Gotcha.
And so if you're the number one person on the list, we're hoping that this is a good match for you, but we're also not going to accept you if you're not even close to being a match.
Gotcha.
So we certainly give an opportunity for our coaches to have input, and we want our coaches' input, and we think that that's really important. But at the same time, you know, some coaches aren't interested in doing that, and we understand that too. And so they're not recruited athletes, but we certainly you know, want to get coaches' input on every single student that, you know, plays soccer and is coming to our school.
Definitely. So in terms of, so there's an athletic piece. There is also an art piece.
Yep.
So it's less talked about in terms of like recruiting for arts or like design, whatever. Theater. Does Milton do that as well, or is it less focused on?
Yeah, we want students to send us portfolios. We want students to send us videos of them playing an instrument or acting or singing, and those are passed on to the appropriate people here at the school. So Lori Dow actually handles all of the arts piece along with Nina Panarese here, and we make sure that Mr. Anantwan is getting all the musical pieces, and he's going to give us feedback, and so we get their feedback as well. You know, if the student has a particular passion, we want to make sure that, number one, they connect with a teacher here or a coach here, and number two, that we evaluate how talented they are. There are some kids that are going to be like absolute earth-shattering people in our arts department or in our athletics department, and we want to make sure that we have those kids on campus and make sure that we you know, cultivate that relationship.
Definitely. So there's a lot of talk about an influx in international students or international applicants applying to American boarding schools. Can you talk a little bit about that? Has it happened at Milton yet? How's the admissions office responding to that?
Yeah, I think Milton has about 26 or so different countries represented. So you know, it's an international place. But I think that we work really hard to make sure that we're getting students from every part of the world. You know, and there obviously has been an increase in international applications, but I think there's been an increase in applications overall as well. So I don't know the percentage of, you know, international applicants versus total applicants, but yeah, we have a significant amount of international students that come through, and so I have an international territory. Chris Kane has an international territory, and so does Lori Dow, and so does Sarah Wooten. So we try to balance all those countries and all those different parts of the world, and make sure that, again, it's a diverse place.
Right. In terms of just my observations studying at Milton, I see a lot of like East Asians in terms of like the international pool of applicants or international students in terms of like the percentage. Is there a particular reason why that is, or?
No, I mean, not necessarily. I think you know, there's a lot of talented students from that part of the world, and we see a lot of really highly qualified kids from that part of the world. And so, I think that sort of translates into them having really good experiences here. And so yeah, I think that's why there are a lot of them here.
Cool. Can we talk a little bit about financial aid?
Sure.
So Milton definitely does have a generous financial aid program. Can you talk a little bit about financial aid?
I think that Milton does a really great job of understanding that this is obviously an expensive place to go to school, and there are some really highly qualified students and their families that aren't able to afford it. So we do try to make sure that every family and every student feels comfortable coming here from a financial standpoint. I think Milton does a great job with it. We have, I think, just over $10 million of aid money, which is significantly more than a lot of our peer schools. So I think that that's really important for us. It's really important for the diversity of the school, and it's something that we think about in the admission office quite a bit.
Sure. Do international students get to receive financial aid?
They do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in terms of distributing the financial aid, is it based on the merit of the applicant? Obviously, there's a limited amount of money. So what happens when that kind of runs out? How does the money get distributed?
Yeah, it's not based on merit. So it's not like a scholarship program or anything, but it's, like we talked about, it's demonstrated need. So every family is going to fill out financial information and send it to the school. And that's sort of how we pass out or hand out the aid or award the aid, for lack of a better term. And so, when the family does apply, that's sort of a different process to apply for aid. And so we want to make sure that, again, every family feels like they can afford this place and be comfortable, sending their son or daughter here.
Definitely. Awesome. That's what I have for now today.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for
thank you.
answering my questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, great.